Welcome to today's free training. I know I've seen quite a few of you before, familiar names, Lila, Daniele. Thank you for coming for previous ones. Good to know that we're doing something right if you're showing up time and time again. So welcome to today's free training, how to apply product strategy in practice to fast track your product career. This will be part one of our Path to Product Leadership series this year, where we're really going to look at the sort of 4 key competencies of product leadership. So product strategy, customer insight, leadership, and also execution. So this is part one. I'd love to get your feedback after over LinkedIn, over the chat, maybe drop me an email. If you thought this is useful, ways that we could improve this, because this will be a series we're going to be working on. Probably do something once every month as well. So do let me know. Now, before we jump in, there'll be some interactive exercises during this free training. So if you post a comment, and we encourage you to do so, just double check that it will send to all panelists and attendees. You can see down here, so that everybody can see what you're posting. Excellent. Now, we'll be giving away a lot of free value in this workshop, and I'm going to be mentioning a few resources, previous trainings, these kinds of things. Many of these things are things we reserve for our paying alumni. So do use these, and any resources I mention, we'll be sending out in an email to you later today. So do use it. As I said, they do use these, they work. Our students will back that up. Maybe Daniele will back that up for us as an alumni, as you can see from our many testimonials. So try them out over the next week, right? Think about strategy, apply strategy. Don't just have this webinar on in the background and just go back to whatever you were doing straight after and forget about it. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of my time. Put ideas into practice. It's the only way that you're really going to grow and really develop your product leadership skills. Now, onto the format. So it's going to be around 35 to 40 minutes of the actual presentation. I'll try and speed that up. And then we're going to have around 10 minutes for Q&A. So any questions on the presentation, on strategy, on what I do in my background as well, feel free to post throughout if you want. I'll come to them after at the end of the presentation. So you can post the questions. I'll come to them at the end of the presentation. What we're going to cover specifically, firstly, what is strategy and what is it not, most importantly? Secondly, how strategy has evolved as digitalization has evolved. And finally, just looking at the 3 stages of product strategy and looking towards how you actually apply this thinking and these concepts in practice. Now, before we jump in though, let's kick off with an interactive exercise. What is a product strategy? Please post in the comments. Just whatever you think it is, whatever comes to the top of mind. If you're not sure, write not sure. Completely fine, even recommended. Very common to not understand this concept. So please feel free to write in the comments. We'll just wait 1 minute and see what comes through. Excellent. Callum, another familiar name as well. So Callum, congrats on the birth of your child recently as well. One thing you want to focus on and how you hypothesize to get there. Interesting. Yeah, you're getting it, parts of it. Yeah, sure. Ahmed, not sure. Completely fine, very normal. Interesting from Lila, a plan to achieve your product vision. Lucy, what have we got? Not entirely sure. Is this how you execute your vision? Interesting. Quite linked to what Lila said there. Nicole, why you are building the thing you are building? Good, very, very simple. But yeah, completely right. Senyo, how a product is developed and feed through the product lifecycle to maturity end of, sort of, yeah. Juan, a plan to achieve a set of objectives and solve business problems. Razvan, a vision on how the product should go. Last one, let's look at Angelina, a structured plan to get to the goal. Interesting, and a lot of comments coming through as well. Very, very interesting. I'm going to save these as well just for later. It's really interesting to see how people interpret them, also based on background, experience, these kind of things. Okay, excellent. We're going to come on to that in a second. Come on to really what product strategy is in a second. Just finally, before we really jump into the sort of meat of this this free training, for those who don't know me, just a bit of context. So I'm Henry Latham, founder of the Product MBA. It's really a part-time 6-week training program designed to fast-track product managers and product owners to head of product by teaching you these 4 product competencies, the ones I mentioned earlier. So product strategy, leadership, customer insight, and execution, by actually getting you to build a product from scratch in that training program. Since starting my first business, Backtracker, back in 2012, and seeing that fail, I've been obsessed with understanding what makes some products succeed and others fail. And really, over the last 9 years, I've worked as a founder and product consultant with startups to help them move towards product market fit, publishing 2 books on the subject of startup success and product leadership in the process, working with a couple of well-known names as well in Berlin. And I spent a lot of time thinking not only about strategy for my business, but also how other businesses apply strategy and how you teach strategy as well, which obviously we do with the Product MBA. So maybe the most important question that we touched upon earlier, like what the hell is strategy? Product strategy is a concept that lies at the heart of effective product leadership and really the success of any product or product-led organization, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Product strategy is not a plan. A product strategy is a framework for helping you make decisions. Now, a plan may be the enactment of a product strategy, but it is not a plan in itself. Unfortunately, however, many companies operate without a coherent product strategy. And we see sort of 2 groups there. So, many of these companies are what we call feature factories. And in a feature factory, the emphasis is on velocity, where teams are pushed and usually incentivized to build as many features as possible, as quickly as possible. And in a feature factory, we also tend to see strategy really misinterpreted, where leadership defines maybe a long-term plan and translates that into a detailed roadmap, well-defined backlog stacked with new features, but ultimately without a coherent strategy moving the business forward. Now, even many companies or product teams who do focus on outcomes, on things like experimentation, on doing product right, by the book, let's say, they also fall into the trap of not having a strategy as well. This can be surprising. I see many companies that will be using a lean iterative approach, but actually they're sort of bouncing around and sort of pivoting all over the place without a coherent vision and strategy, sort of tying those experiments and those pivots together to be sort of learning in a sequential way, where that learning is really building up in a way that better informs product decisions. So just to reiterate that point, product strategy is not a plan, nor is it about having a detailed roadmap, well-defined backlog. Product strategy is a framework where it is crystal clear to stakeholders and to yourselves what should be worked on and what should not be worked on. Here's a really nice definition. Feel free to screenshot this from Melissa Perry, who's CEO of ProduX. I've probably heard of her as well as the author of Escaping the Build Trap. Quote that, "A good strategy is not a plan, it's a framework that helps you make decisions. Strategy creation is the process of determining the direction of the company and developing the framework in which people make decisions." So it's not about constraining, it's about just having sort of guardrails. I've heard as another description of this, just a framework to work within. And that clarity comes from understanding what specific, unique value your product offers your target customer and what is not unique and valuable to them. As an example, in our case of the Product MBA, our customers value hands-on learning and mentorship. We know this from surveying customers and speaking to them. Here are some common answers we see. And we also know that from quantitative data gathered on course progress, right? We can see where people have dropped off historically, where things are not actionable, where there's not enough support, then not enough mentorship. So when it comes to decision-making, just on a basic level, and if you take one thing away, take this away today, when it comes to decision-making prioritization, in our case, we simply ask ourselves, will this help make Product MBA offer more hands-on learning and effective mentorship? If we believe it won't, then we simply won't do it. Sure, it would be nice to have HD quality videos and in-depth case studies for every point we make, but it's not part of our core value, and it's not part of really what the biggest point of value we can create for our customers is. So we're not going to commit to resources to these kinds of things, particularly as a small business. If we believe, on the other hand, that something will add to these key points of value, then we will double down on that. If it's going to take a lot of time or not, if it's worth it, we're going to build it. We're going to deliver that value to the customers, because that value will then be captured by the business in terms of revenue. And it's as simple as that. So as I said, if you take one thing away, just ask yourself today, has your company ever been clear on what their USP is, their unique selling point, on what they won't do? Are there guardrails about what you won't do as a company, on what to relentlessly focus on and ignore everything else, even ignoring competition at times? Because if not, it's unlikely that you have a product strategy. And maybe more worrying is that you'll be in the majority if that's the case. The vast majority of companies fail to ever even identify what their unique value is, or they quickly become divorced from that unique value as they start to grow, losing sight of really the reason customers interacted with their product in the first place. And maybe they start looking to the competition for new ideas rather than experimenting internally and really focusing on what matters. Really, that comes down to understanding and delivering unique, relevant value to their customers. So we get a picture of what strategy is. Now let's look at how we look at what I call advanced strategy in the Product MBA program itself. So what is that evolution, and what are the kinds of things we want to be actually looking towards in the future in the modern world? So I'm sure everybody is aware that the competitive landscape has shifted dramatically over the last 10, 20 years. Look at Amazon, Google, they're disrupting market after market. Yet we need to understand what's actually going on there and what specifically these companies have done differently, and how they've changed the game for other companies really attempting to survive or even thrive in an ever more competitive world. So in this section, we're going to look at how the definition of what a company really is has changed, zooming in to look at the changes in how we approach a business model, how we approach an operating model to build an effective product-led organization. At the end, we're then going to look at the case study of Alibaba and Alipay as an example of really how modern companies operate, how they think about advanced product strategy. And then in the final section, we look at, okay, how do we go from ideal down into practice and into actually delivering results in our day-to-day work. 1 second. So without going into too much depth on the development of business over time and the role of the company historically, suffice to say that specialization traditionally always drove success. So if we look at sort of post-industrial revolution, the general operating model of a business was to create highly specialized tasks for highly specialized individuals to drive down the cost of the final product. Think of the Ford factory line. And in the past, although we see specialization paying dividends for very specific products, the Ford T or these sort of replicable physical products, it also brought with it a lot of complexity. So, just think of all the moving parts involved with building a specific model of a car, the process, the personnel, and then think what would happen if you discontinue that and have to build something new as a basic example. And we see this move across into, even modern organizations, right? That as complexity grows in an organization, as the company grows, operational costs tend to grow to manage that complexity whilst the service level decrease. What does that mean? i.e., it's going to cost you more to ship each unit of value to a customer whilst the value will generally decrease, right, when we're looking at strategy on a company level. So think even of like a service-based product, like an accountancy offer from a large company like KPMG. When the founder's working directly with a client, they can move really, really quickly and adapt any offering on the fly. However, when that company has, let's say, 50,000 employees, the client will likely deal directly with a junior employee who's got little autonomy, little knowledge outside of their specialized sort of siloed area within the business. And traditionally, they will therefore deliver less value to the customer. So traditionally, the bigger you got, the slower you got, the more expensive you got, and the less value you were able to deliver. And therefore, on a company level, as a strategy in terms of how we manage both product and the organization, we need to think differently nowadays. So take the example of Ant Financial, right, which is a subsidiary of one of Chinese tech giant Alibaba. So Ant Financial employs fewer than 10,000 staff, but services 700 million customers with a broad variety of financial services. Now compare that to Bank of America, founded in 1924, which employs 209,000 staff to serve 67 million customers with a really limited array of mortgage offers, investment offers. The company's operating on, ignore the inaccurate balance of these graphs, but the companies are operating on very different planets. And why is that? It's not just about clever technology, but it's really about because of Ant Financial's operating model and its business model. And at the heart of these, which we're going to cover next, is really this automated data-driven process that has removed human tasks and therefore bottlenecks from delivering quality value to customers at infinite scale. So coming back to what we talked at the beginning about what strategy is how do we actually deliver on that strategy once we define what our strategy might be? And we're going to come on to these 3 steps a little bit later. So if you're lucky enough to sort of be leading a digital organization or leading within a digital organization, then what we're going to cover next should hopefully help you understand the huge opportunities as well as the challenges of operating as a sort of truly effective strategic product organization. If you're leading in a traditional organization, then you need to understand very quickly how to leverage this new operating and business model to transform your organization to support a new type of product strategy, right? This is what I call an advanced product strategy. And complexity, this is what we talked about earlier, as companies sort of bloat and get more complex. This is what traditionally what is causing traditional organizations to collapse at the moment. And therefore, really the goal of any new or existing organization must be to reduce organizational complexity to keep operational costs low, to continue to improve service levels, even at scale. Right? So do well at scale, essentially. And this is really achieved by rethinking 2 key elements of any company: the digital business model, the digital operating model. Sorry, correct that wording there. So if we have these 2 things, we can then apply strategy or apply an effective strategy with our product, with our portfolio of products, with our organization as well. But firstly, what is a digital operating model? Well, essentially, a company's operating model can be defined as the way that company delivers value to its customers in practice. So the operating model is how the theory of the business model, really the company's strategy, translates into practice in practice. Right? Ultimately, the goal of the operating model is to deliver value at scale as the organization grows. And as we talked about before, successful companies need to mitigate the risk of sort of higher operational costs and reduce value delivery as the company grows, because that's what really slows down, bloats, and ultimately kills organizations. And a successful operating model at scale really relies on 2 key things. So firstly, to achieve sufficient scope. What do I mean by that? To be gathering sufficient high-value data to seamlessly inform decisions across the organization. Secondly, to respond to changes in an agile manner. So specifically to be learning from the data being gathered in order to make better product decisions across the organization, across individual teams. Now that could be how you manage your sales process, your customer support process. It could be also how you inform the key product decisions yourself. Like, for example, using artificial intelligence with Google search, let's say, that kind of product. And now the second function, really the learning function of the operating model, is essential to long-term success. So without continuous improvement, driven by reliable data and an ability and also motivation to learn from that data to inform decisions, the company will not be effective at dealing with threats to existing product offers, nor really develop good, effective, high-value new products and services. We're going to come on to how to build this sort of operating model driven by continuous improvement shortly when we look at the 3 steps of product strategy. So secondly, what is a digital business model? So stated above, stated before, where the company's operating model is the actual way the company delivers value to its customers in practice. The business model is really the plan, the theoretical strategy to deliver value in theory. And a company's business model is therefore defined by how it creates and captures value from its customers. And the concept of the business model, has not really changed over time. But what has changed is the nature of how value is created and captured. What constitutes the different parts of the business model. Those have changed over time. Those are things we need to be really, really aware of to be effective in product leadership roles. And when we look at sort of new breed of highly successful digital companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc., they're highly innovative when it comes to the business model. They're experimenting, combining very different products and services to create and capture value in these highly nuanced, complex ways. Just think of how Google, the sort of the map, let's say the web of Google search, Google Maps, how that ties into its revenue platform, like Google AdWords, for example. Like, how do we piece these things together? We'll come on to a case study of that shortly. Just contrast that to traditional companies, and also how it's still taught in MBA programs, how we are operating in many of our companies as well. And the business model is fairly simple. You have a handful of standalone products or services, and each has a simple pricing mechanism. Right? So here's the product, here's the price, take it or leave it, is how many of us operate. And that's fine, but again, we want to be looking ahead to actually how do we tie different products together to maximize value for the customer and capture that value as revenue. So onto the sort of how do we actually think about this in practice? We looked a little bit high level there, but what are these concepts? What do we need within our organization, within our product teams as well, to actually make good product decisions long term? Let's now roll that back to how do we break this down into practice. So as I said, clearly when it comes to actually applying a coherent, effective product strategy in your own company, not every company is the same, far from it. There are very different stages a company is going to go through that should determine what your current strategy should be. And that starts with, firstly, understanding on a deep level what the problem the product or company is solving. Right? You may think you know this. 44% of startups fail because they fail to crack this. Right? They fail to not solve a problem. So you need to understand deeply who is the target customer, what is their core frustration, what's their desired ideal outcome, what beliefs do they have that might, create friction, preventing them engaging with your offer, or maybe what pushes them towards your offer. For example, case of the Prod MBA. If we position ourselves as a course, people believe that courses are a waste of time, rightly in most cases. So what do? If we understand that belief, we position ourselves against that. We say this is not a course, and we make sure that everything we do when we deliver value in the program is not like a course. Everything is hands-on and practical, not just passively watching a couple of videos and you get a nice certificate at the end. But I go into a lot of detail on how to identify and validate business opportunities, how to really understand the problem in previous trainings, and probably a few future trainings as well. So I'm going to send out this step in a separate webinar, as I said, in the email I'll send out later today. I think the important thing to remember, however, is the following, that many existing products, so you may go, well, this is great for a new company. Not true. That many existing products do not understand what problem they are solving. Just to throw another stat at you, your consultancy firm Strategy X even estimated that 95% of product ideas fail because they fail to understand the actual core frustration. We look surface level, we never go down a level. Right? They misidentify the problem. They look at too broad a problem. They fail to focus on a specific niche. They fail to address an acute problem, or simply get distracted by the infinite other things they could be solving, or captured, their attention gets captured by an exciting solution. I see this even with guys with 5, 10, 15 years experience in the Prod MBA that they're not able to go a level deeper. They don't have the practice. So really, really important to nail down the problem. Or, a company may have understood the problem initially and they grow very quickly and actually become divorced from the problem that they were solving in the first place. They cloud their value proposition that they built their success on and become a bit sort of lost and lacking direction as results start to disappear. What is the second stage? Well, the second stage is really achieving product market fit. So only once your team has a very clear, nuanced and deep understanding of the problem space you're operating in will you have a chance of achieving product market fit. So again, coming back to that step before, having that really focused view of what unique value are we offering, how are we doubling down on that continuously. Again, we cover this in a lot of other free trainings that I'm going to send out, but just very briefly, what is product market fit? Well, essentially building, PMF is building something that a specific target customer loves so much, they use it regularly, pay for that product and tell their friends about it. Because many companies fail to complete stage one, they ultimately struggle to achieve product market fit, with an unclear offer that doesn't quite resonate with the target customer, maybe a solution that's just a bit generic and lacking value that investors might find exciting. Your core target customer doesn't really care about. And as a result of skipping this step one, most companies fail at this stage, right? They grow too slowly to raise investment to fuel growth to the next stage, or they fail to generate enough revenue to achieve profitability. As I said, I go into that in a lot of detail in another training that I'll send out, but just to give you a good idea of why it's really important and why we can't skip to step 3 before we achieve these 2 stages before. What is that third step? Well, really, it's the one we've already been looking at, introduced earlier, but it should be something that should only be addressed once we start to see steady growth. And that is the final step of really building and leveraging what we call an AI factory, or this sort of automated decision making, really building a digital, agile operating business model to help us really fuel growth. As I said, we touched on this earlier, but now let's delve into this topic and examine that, what is the nature of so how do we apply this sort of operating business model concept in practice as part of building an AI factory as a strategy for product success. So we're going to delve into the case of Alipay in a second, just to really show you how some of these top companies are operating. But first, what is an AI factory? So behind the successful business and operating models of companies like Ant Financial, Netflix is another one, lies what we call automated business intelligence. According to authors of Competing in the Age of AI, Yanceti Lakhani, they call this the AI factory. So what do we mean when we talk about this word? Really, it's that decisions are being increasingly made by automated, digitized software. We'll come on to the case of this later, rather than by human employees. And that consequently, the organizational model has changed from one driven by humans to one driven by automation and artificial intelligence. Right? This is the final stage of effective product strategy. In practice, what does that AI factory constitute? Really four things. So first, a robust data pipeline so that decisions can be made with accuracy and reliability, importantly. Secondly, the development of algorithm, so the company can actually analyze and learn from the data to identify product opportunities. And then thirdly, really a platform to enable experimentation across the company. So when we run experiments, A/B tests, for example, we can actually run these with no friction. Different agile teams can be working on different parts of the product at the same time. Finally, software infrastructure that's quite seamless, so that people can be building, agile teams can be building new products or features very rapidly on the same products. Really important as a point on this, and why we wait for a specific, we have to go through the steps, because without these prerequisites, your company can try to be agile, you can try to run A/B tests, they're going to fail to do so in an effective way. Very common one is running A/B tests that have no statistical significance, maybe being unreliable because of the way you structured the data, maybe because you have data in different places. So, maybe retention is not accurately tracked in your core product metrics, or sales data is kept somewhere else, for example. We need to have these prerequisites before we even think about moving forward with informing our decisions with the AI factory. And really, in essence, the goal of the AI factory, this third stage of product strategy, is to create this continuous virtuous cycle of collecting data, analyzing it algorithmically, making predictions, making improvements, and increasing user engagement, really value creation, with the ultimate goal of increasing profit, right? Value capture. And the result of this, and why all companies must attempt to replicate this operating model at some stage, is that we can build an array of digital products that are used far more often, and that as a collective generate far more revenue than traditional products at the fraction of the cost, because we can be so effective in delivering value. Again, think Netflix, think Google, think Facebook. Let's look at an example of this in action with Alipay, because it's all been lots of these sort of buzzwords and nebulous examples. So let's look at a really concrete example of how we can think about the AI factory as final stage of product strategy in practice. So specifically, we look at Alipay and at how a digital operating model enables unlimited scalability and scope expansion through data-driven learning. So for those of you who are unaware, Alipay is a financial payments tool that's owned by a company called Ant Financial, who was launched by Alibaba, who's now, I think, 30% owner of that company, although that may change with the Chinese government getting involved at the moment. So Alipay itself is a product offered by Ant Financial, as I said, but also quite the highest rated financial technology company in the world. And let's look specifically now at how the company creates and captures value as an example of this sort of modern digital company. So Alipay's value proposition is based on offering, quote, fast, easy, and safe online payments to facilitate an extremely broad and large market of buyers and sellers of goods. You can see even there that the value proposition reflects the stage of the business, right? We did not fast, easy, and safe online payments for example, B2B developers or whatever it is, but very, very broad now, but still with three specific elements: fast, easy, safe, even online, maybe implicit. Still quite very, very focused, even for the largest financial product in the world. So Alipay's business model really relies on an increasingly high volume of transactions, both from existing buyers and sellers, as well as new buyers and sellers on the platform. The more people on the platform, the more transactions there are, the more the value proposition even increases, right? Because it's making it faster, easier, safer, the more people that are on the platform. Yet this rapidly expanding business model would not be possible without a really innovative digital operating model in place, and also how it fits together with these other organizations and other products within this sort of Alibaba portfolio. So firstly, Ant Financial relies on the foundation of what we talked about earlier, this AI-enabled digital automation processes. So for example, if a customer wants to take out a loan through Ant Financial's My Bank product, it's going to take 3 minutes to apply through the application, 1 second for approval, and requires 0 human interaction. And it can do that because it's pulling data from other products, right? So if we look at Alibaba, essentially a similar version of Amazon, it's pulling in lots of sales data from their payment data. How reliable is the customer? These kinds of things. And using that within this, let's say, mortgage tool or loan tool, for example. Ant Financial, though, doesn't just use algorithms to look at transaction data and assess how well a business might be doing, competitive position in the market, and whether its partners have high credit ratings, etc. So firstly, they're looking at all of that really complex financial data, but also they're looking at things like the frequency, length, and type of communication with the company to assess relationship quality. So speaking through a bot, it's going to be analyzing really ultimately the quality of your WeChat or WhatsApp conversation before approving a loan. So it's using this really rich bank of data to automate good product decisions, good business decisions in this case. And through this analysis, as I said, the company can create a credit score for approving a loan, in seconds through automation. Looking at, as I said, transaction data, business financials, partners credit rating, all of this complex web of data. Now compare that complex, deep financial and behavioral analysis to how a traditional bank would approve a loan. You're looking at basic financial data, doing so in person, lots of back and forth over email. And you can see why companies like Ant Financial are really just operating on a whole different level. Secondly, by the way, they've digitized the operating model so that they have this AI factory at the core, right? With this database and automated decisions and automated learnings, the company's able to learn and act extremely quickly. That vast data, and this is very important, opening that data to the rest of the organization in a way that teams can simply access and learn from the data seamlessly to make good product decisions themselves and also to launch new products. So you see, modern organization like this advanced stage of strategy, just with a relatively small number of truly agile teams, and not just using buzzwords around agile, truly agile teams using this complex database, this AI factory to, in this case, take the financial markets by storm in China in just a few years. I think, you might correct me on this, I think they've only been around for 5 or 6 years as well. Yet, and you're probably thinking this right now, right? Even if we're able to build such an operating model, such a business model, sort of package this together into an AI factory with agile teams making good decisions off of that base, even then, some things to be thinking about that are relevant if you ever find yourself working in one of these environments. It's like, how do we defend our position in the market? I won't go into much detail on this. It'll require a whole nother webinar on further strategy. But things like, for example, do we have a rich data set? So is it easy for somebody to copy our data set? Let's say if we run Tesla with all those car journeys, millions of car journeys, that's quite difficult to copy, right? All of that rich data. Secondly, do we have a complex algorithm? Google's search function, for example, is that hard to copy? And then finally, I'll talk about this in another free training, really network effects. So are we leveraging different players in the market to be constantly building our value proposition? The more people use Google, the better it gets for the day-to-day user, the better it gets for the advertiser because they're getting more accurate data. However, if we run something like Netflix, and we're starting to see this now, where we don't have network effects, we can't lock people in. We see people, using other products, Amazon Prime, Disney, for example. So even then we have threat, even when we're, top 10 company in the world and how we operate like Netflix, there's still going to be competition coming after you and coming after you very aggressively. But ultimately, look, when it comes to applying product strategy in practice, we need to be realistic. And I think that's where we have to put our feet back on the ground. It's great to obviously think about operating one of these companies, using a complex portfolio of products. But our role as a product leader is always risk mitigation. Therefore, we have to be very, very realistic. We have to be realistic in how we apply product strategy in practice. We need to ask ourselves, firstly, what stage are we at? We may work in a really mature, established company, but do we have focus when it comes to the problem we're solving? Do we have signs of product market fit? Has that changed, maybe since COVID, since the last 5-10 years, for example? Because if not, we should not be thinking about anything beyond that. We should not be thinking about digitization. We should not be thinking about trying to operate like a top 10 company. Secondly, looking ahead, which decisions can we realistically automate and digitize? We might not be able to operate and have a business model like Ant Financial and Netflix, where we can start integrating automation and AI into, for example, customer support. How do we manage customer support? How do we pull in that data if it's just qualitative conversation, feedback on the website? How are we pulling that into our decision making? You were working product here. Can we use tools like Product Board where we are doing that process automatically as opposed to Jira and a combo sort of Jira, Typeform, Google Sheets, for example? So let's be realistic. How can we sort of start moving towards operating in a really effective, advanced way? Finally, we're just coming to wrap up in the next minute or so. It's easy and exciting to think we should build the next big thing, right? The next sort of global player. Feeds into our ego a lot. Feeds into the narrative as well in the sort of startup and tech space. But at times, and as I said, that's really our core responsibility as a product leader. We need to be realistic. We need to be strategic in where we position ourselves in the market, considering the huge challenge of building a truly digital operating model and business model. Is it not better to start very specific? Start with the problem. Start with a very specific offer and solution. We assume the market is winner takes all, that Google, Amazon own the world. But the market shows otherwise. That actually 80% of the market is found in small niche products, right? This gray part of the graph. And only 20% are captured by huge companies like Amazon or Google. And therefore, when it comes to defining your own product strategy, focus on these 3 stages, the ones we talked about, right? So defining a specific acute problem, making sure that you're really digging deep on that problem. Secondly, moving towards product market fit. We do that in a very objective way using something called the product market fit engine, which I've covered in a previous training. And then only then looking at moving out of the long tail, right? A niche problem, a niche product to build a large digital product portfolio and organization. It's a good example of that in practice and how we've applied that the product MBA. Our core product is still moving towards product market fit. We're seeing signs there. We have a simple pay for the product, and that's simple as that. But we are looking at building other tools around that. So how do we feed people into the funnel? How do we expand our product portfolio? For example, a custom built skills assessment that pushes people towards a sales funnel. What about building a second product accelerator program, for example? So even as sort of, you could even call it a non-digital business, you can apply all of these concepts really effectively. And I think, from my experience, understanding these different stages helps you, as I said, to move really sequentially and move at the right time forward and develop your product effectively. We covered a lot in this training. I've tried to compact it in, and I have run over by 5 minutes or so. We covered, what strategy is, really that framework for decision making, and what it is not. There's not a plan. You can't you have to be clear on what you are doing, what you're not doing. We looked at the importance of really focusing your decision making there, on leveraging the modern operating model and business model, and using that example of Ant Financial, but also Product MBA, as I said, small businesses as well. This is very applicable. We looked also at how to be realistic in approaching strategy. So as I said, those 3 stages, I don't care what people are saying in your company, but you need to go through those 3 stages. You need to measure those 3 stages. Do you understand the problem? Do you have signs of product market fit? Only then can you really invest in a longer term product strategy. Not trying to run before you walk. But clearly, I can't teach you much in a passive 30-minute webinar. Everyone's sitting silently, sort of listening to me go on and on. So for those who actually want to really learn these 3 stages, really learn product strategy in practice and actually putting it into practice by building a product from scratch, we have just opened up applications for our next cohort. So there are 3 still early bird places still available. And those are £1,000 cheaper than the fixed price. So if you'd like to learn more, then just a quick ask before we go on to the Q&A, just for 5-10 minutes. As I said, 3 places available. If you'd like, the process is essentially just booking a call with me using that link below. We're going to ask you a couple of questions when you book the call, 30-minute call just to give you a bit more information on the program. And finally, if we think you're a good fit, if it seems a good fit from your side, then we'll talk about the next steps, like when we're moving forward with that. So as I said, putting theory into practice is what differentiates being okay at products from being an effective product leader, being able to really shape your approach to product. So if you're interested in joining the next cohort, as I said, those places will sell out very quickly, I think within the next week. So do book a call in the next 5 days or so we can help you really develop your product career. Finally, and I've ignored all the questions if they have been coming through, let's move on to the Q&A. So as I said, I'm just going to quickly post that link if anyone would like to book a call. I'm going to cover some of the questions. Okay, excellent. So let's go through some of the questions we've got. Any thoughts, any comments so far on the framework? Anything just not clear before I go into some of these maybe more strategic questions? So, sorry, 1 second. I just need to send this to the right. Sorry, it is not sending to all attendees. Excellent. Okay, cool. So let's have a look through. Good meme game. Thank you from Lila. Ronald, how to manage your product? Ronald, do you mind? Oh, sorry, that's from their product strategy. So sorry, I thought that was a question. From Lila, let's take this first question. So as your company and your product grows in complexity, how should product leaders think about the product strategy at the company level within their own domain? What should be the life expectancy of your product strategy? It's a really good question. Stripe is a good example of this. Like when do you expand out? I think it's, you could look at measures of market saturation, like when have you reached the maximum of your niche? I think though, the really important thing, and this is always overlooked, is getting the value right in the first place is very difficult. The modern market, when books came out like Lean Startup, the market was less busy, less competitive because it was harder to put something out there. Nowadays, because you can put a landing page up in minutes, the marketplace is very competitive, therefore it's very hard to find unique value in the market. You're not going to be the first of anything. You can be, it's unlikely. So you have to be very, very good at understanding that very specific, unique value. And as I said, in our case, that's hands-on learning, that is mentorship and support. Now, onto your question, how do you manage that as you grow? I don't think there's an answer. I think it's simply, when have you reached saturation? I think you're only going to see that when, for example, you see people outside of your core niche maybe coming in. So let's say, in our case, right, our core focus is really product managers, product owners, product leads, and startups as well. We start seeing more entrepreneurs coming in or applying, some designers. So then we go, okay, how might we expand this to be a little bit broader? Now, because we have a base of strong referrals, track record of delivering as well, it's easier to make that decision at a later stage. Now, however, you're going to be reducing your conversion on your core audience, but obviously opening up into a broader market. So I think always it's a trade-off, right? The less specific you are with your offer, the lower your conversion is going to be, but obviously you're increasing your pool. I think personally that an effective way to manage that nowadays is to just change the positioning of the offer. So like for us, curriculum might stay the same. How do we position ourselves to product managers? How might we just change that to entrepreneurs as an example? But yeah, I don't think there's a clear example, or I'm not qualified to sort of give you a really comprehensive answer on that as well. Question from Nicole. We're going to wrap up in 5 minutes. If anyone wants to drop off, they're completely fine as well. I know you might have to get back to work. If not, we'll send out the replay as well later. So sorry, question from Nicole. If a company is very tech-based and has good data algorithms already, how can you make sure that going forward, the right strategy is there? Almost working backwards slightly to have a clear strategy going forward. Great question. Again, I see this a lot because there's a fetishization of tech. Any company that has AI in their name is going to get investment. Just fact at the moment, because there is a huge opportunity. If you get it right, become the next Google. Great point though. So Nicole, as I said, you have to go through the motions, and this is what we really teach in the Product is. There's a 6-step process of saying, even when you're building a new product in the Product but that's not what the learning's there for. It's to reapply these concepts. So rediscovering your vision and your strategy can actually be very simple. We teach that you go reach out to 5 people in a very specific target market, existing customers. Say when you're doing a user interview, I'll send you the replay of this. When we do the user interview, we are writing down specific adjectives and problems that they're mentioning. Now, when it comes to the vision and strategy, we're simply flipping those into opportunities. So if, for example, I'm interviewing busy tech executives and they are saying, researching, let's say, an email tool. They say, email takes too long. It's too slow. How do we pitch our vision and strategy, our USP? We're going to be the fastest email service in the world, as an example. And it is literally as simple as that. Speak to 5-10 people from your target customer, identify the problems, common, most acute problems, flip those into opportunities. Maybe you have 3 or 5 words there, opportunity, and then package that into your what we call a minimal viable offer, really your vision statement. You take maybe two adjectives that are really key there. It can be as simple as that. And then your goal is obviously you're not going to, if you're in a larger company, you can't just say, right, everybody stop everything. We're just going to focus on this vision and rebuild from scratch. You're just going to gradually start, things in the backlog, conversations that are being had around strategy, just start moving it in the direction of those 1 or 2 key points of value. But yeah, great question. As I said, I'm going to note down actually to send you that on the validation training, because I think that will show you exactly how to approach that. Interesting, Shenyo. Having worked at Alibaba and other companies thereafter, one of the issues identifies the use of legacy system and investment resistance to change or habits. What's the best way to change a company's culture and way of thinking straight right there? Oh, that is a book in itself. I think brief answer is apathy is very difficult to overcome. That can be, cultural apathy, organizational apathies. We've done things a certain way for so long. So legacy systems need to be avoided from day one. I think as a product leader, you need to be aware that any decision that seems very small at the start has massive consequences. So again, if you're splitting, let's say, sales, customer support, and maybe product data in different places, it can be very hard to bring that together. If you have legacy, legacy code base that's split again over different, if it's not constructed properly, you're never going to achieve the AI factor. It's going to take a massive amount of work to change that. So I think just as a lesson is try to get in companies early to shape the culture before apathy builds up. Secondly, just realize that there are huge consequences of every tool that you're going to be using, every small decision like that. So really zoom out a bit. And I think that's a key part of being effective as a product leader. You zoom out and try to look at things a little bit more long-term as well. I don't know if that helped, but yeah, that's a really big question. Who we got? Lucy, how do you see product strategy informing different product teams' responsibilities / areas of focus? Have you seen examples of this working well in practice? Yeah, I think a lot of what we think of as, I saw, for example, Product Plan launched a survey on last year based on state of product management. Most common topic was prioritization. That's been the most common topic every survey I've seen. Prioritization is not the problem. Prioritization is actually very easy if you have a strategy in place. Again, you go, even in a portfolio of products, it's like, okay, we understand the sort of 2-3 points of value for the business. What are we doing on a high, like OKR level or objective level that's going to tie into that? Then simply the question is, when we prioritize, is this going to help us achieve X? If not, we don't do it. It's as simple as that. The problem that I see is that companies, because they're driven by sort of panic to grow very quickly, there's a lot of incentives there. They try to do everything thinking that it's a safer approach. Right? So, hey, if we do everything, something might work. That never works. Works for a while. At some point, you're going to get disrupted because you're building a generic product. So it's about being crystal clear that here are the two things we focus on, product teams. Now, what do we choose within those that we think is going to really move the needle? So it's just tying everything in this really, really nice, concise way. Excellent. I think that is it. Any other questions before we wrap up? I know we've run over. Sorry about that. I think this is a big topic to squeeze in half an hour. Not done justice. And I think we're going to do maybe 2, maybe even 3 further sessions on this. So if you're really interested, as I said, we're going to make the next one a bit more actionable, get you really involved with it. So keep following the emails and see where we're at. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Daniel. Really nice feedback. Good. Don't run before you walk. I like that. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Nathaniel, as well. Shinjo, thanks for joining. Asha, thank you for joining. Ahmed, thank you for joining. Lila, Lucy as well. Thank you for all the questions and support. Been really, really helpful. Ronald as well. Maria, thank you. Mariana as well. Really, really happy that you enjoyed it. And feel free to send Daniele as well. Always a pleasure. Feel free to send any questions you have through. I will be sending out the replay evening your time. So check your inbox tomorrow. Feel free to send it on as well to any other colleagues. I think really, really helpful to sort of think through some of these frameworks. And as I said, any questions related to anything product MBA related, always feel free to reach out. Thank you so much, everybody. And that is a wrap, and hopefully see you on the next session.